Block Dragon is a rock monster, despite its name, which was released in 2016 and banned in September of 2020. Why was this card able to be in the game for 4 years before finally getting hit? Well, Block Dragon is another one of those cases where cards were released later on that made it retroactively kind of broken. However, this card was always ripe for future abuse anyway because it was made broken right out the gate kind of on purpose. This card has the effect where it can special summon itself from your hand or graveyard by banishing any 3 earth monsters from your hand or graveyard. It has a passive effect on the field where rock monsters can't be destroyed by card effects. It also has decent stats, and it has an effect where, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard in any way, you can add up to 3 rock monsters from your deck to your hand, just as long as their combined levels equals exactly 8. And its effect to search out 3 monsters has a hard once per turn. So it's one of the very few monsters that's able to summon itself from the graveyard and not be banished afterwards. And it's supposed to be balanced by the fact that it requires 3 resources in order to do this. But its ability to summon itself is not once per turn, so you can just keep doing it as long as you have earth monsters to banish. This alone makes the card pretty valuable, especially since it works with any earth monsters and not just rock types. It also has a decent body on the board with some decent protection too, which probably would have pushed this card into scene play as is. But the reason this card is broken because it has these 2 effects on top of a broken search, because it literally goes +2 in card advantage if you're able to search out all 3 cards. The reason this card was fine for so long before it eventually got banned was because rock was one of those very under-supported types that had a whole bunch of garbage cards, kind of like how the pyro type is currently. So this card was meant in order to try to boost the power level of that type of card, by giving them a really powerful searcher and boss monster that could be added to any rock-based deck. Because at least you could use this effect to search out 2 level 4 rock monsters if it was sent to the graveyard, and it only really searched out 3 monsters if you built your deck specifically around being able to get out 3 searches, by maybe playing some suboptimal cards at lower levels. But there are 2 very meta decks that were able to search out the full 3 cards every time it was sent to the graveyard, and turn that +2 in card advantage into a real threat. The first of the decks that actually made use of Block Dragon was the Gem Knight FTK, which became viable once their Link monster Gem Knight Phantom Quartz was released in 2018. The way Gem Knight FTK worked was they would bring out the fusion monster Gem Knight Lady Lapis Lazuli, who had the effect to inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent for each special summon monster on the field, but could only be special summoned once per turn. So what you would do is get 6 special summon monsters on your side of the field, then activate Lapis Lazuli's effects 3 times for a win. And even though the card can only be summoned once, you could use its effect 2 other times thanks to the effect of Gem Knight Master Diamond being able to copy the effect in the graveyard, and not having a hard once per turn on its summon or effect. And some of the key cards in order to get the combo going were Gem Knight Lapis, a level 3 normal monster needed in order to bring out Gem Knight Lady Lapis Lazuli, Gem Knight Obsidian, a level 3 monster that could get more special summon monsters on the field, and Crystal Rose, a level 2 rock monster that could get another material on the field for plays. And what do you know? The levels of these 3 monsters equals exactly 8, and are all crucial parts of the combo. So getting Block Dragon in the field as soon as possible in order to send it to the graveyard was kind of the first step in performing their FTK. So they would usually turbo into Curious in order to send Block Dragon to the graveyard so that it could come out and perform its search. Konami did try to stop Gem Knight FTK by banning Brilliant Fusion and limiting Gem Knight Master Diamond, so Block Dragon was able to avoid the ban list for this interaction, but not the next one. Konami then released an archetype called Emancipators, which is a full rock archetype that has a whole bunch of level 2 and level 4 monsters that can special summon themselves from the hand or the top of the deck. And since the whole archetype is only level 2 and level 4 main deck rock monsters, they could easily search out the full 3 rock monsters on Block Dragon going to the graveyard. And Emancipators were so powerful, especially with Block Dragon them giving them just a free +2 every turn, that's what finally tipped the scales of Konami thinking, okay, this card's too much. And it was finally banned in 2020, coincidentally shortly after Emancipators were released in the TCG. Can Block Dragon be unbanned? Anyone who's played Master Duel can kind of see the full power of Block Dragon, because as of making this video, Block Dragon is unlimited in that game alongside a nearly full powered Gem Knight FTK and Emancipators. So, I guess I should say no, it should definitely not be unbanned, and they should hurry up and ban it in Master Duel already. It's an effortless +2 for anything that makes use of rock monsters, and there are a couple of decks that are actually able to make use of it to great effect. How can they fix Block Dragon to unban the card? If they change the activation requirement for how to perform the search, where you can only do the search if the card is sent to the graveyard if it's destroyed by an attacking monster, that might actually be enough to fix the card while leaving everything else intact. Currently, it is incredibly easy to meet the conditions of performing the search, because you can just send it to the graveyard for a link summon, and then go +2 off of its effect, or +3 depending on how you count the card for that link summon. If you only get the search if it's destroyed by an attacking monster, similar to how Divine Serpent Get activates, then it wouldn't be usable at all in the combos that it's currently used in, but would still have a place in decks as just an easy to bring out rock monster anyway, and could probably use more for its intended purpose as a boss monster of the rock type. Next up, we have Victory Dragon. This is a level 8 dragon monster which has the effect where it can't be special summoned, and you have to tribute 3 dragon type monsters in order to tribute summon this card. And its effect is that if this card attacks directly and reduces your opponent's life points to 0, you win the match, which means you don't have to do a game 2 or 3, so it automatically wins another duel outside of the current one. And a way this effect could be applied to great advantage is if you're playing some really unconventional deck that's able to steal a game from your opponent on turn 1. Stall out long enough to bring out Victory Dragon, and then beat them before they're able to go into their side deck to try to counter your unconventional strategy. Similar to how Self-Destruct button was used in the past, because in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, it's actually not that hard to steal the first victory in a game. But it is very hard to win the next two, because of the side deck mechanic of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh just allows you to completely counter a lot of unconventional strategies. So Victory Dragon kind of allows you to take advantage of trying to make best use of your first game, so that you can entirely avoid the side deck. However, unlike Self-Destruct button, which was actually used to competitive effectiveness of taking advantage of these rulings, Victory Dragon is kind of the opposite, where it could technically be used in this way, but was mostly banned because it caused its own set of ruling confusions and unsportsmanlike conduct. You see, the way to counter Victory Dragon is to just simply surrender the duel before Victory Dragon can resolve its effect. And technically, you're allowed to surrender whenever you want. So if you know for a fact Victory Dragon's effect is going to go off, you can just surrender as soon as it's about to declare an attack, and completely avoid the effect. However, this might cause some arguments between players, which might get judges called to their table and just waste a whole bunch of everybody's time. So in order to just completely remove unsportsmanlike conduct from the game, there are a couple of cards that are banned for that purpose, and Victory Dragon is definitely one of them. Victory Dragon was banned in March of 2007. Could Victory Dragon be unbanned? The answer to this question is yes, absolutely, and nobody would play it. It doesn't really need to be banned, it's just there to not waste anyone's time in an event in case someone does try to use it and be annoying. How can they fix Victory Dragon to be unbanned? They don't really need to do anything because the effect is already fine as is, where it's incredibly mediocre and not really worth trying to build around because of how easy it is to dodge the effect by just simply surrendering. Next up, we have Spiral Master Plan. This is a level 7 monster which has the effect where, once per turn, it can add a Spiral Mission card from your deck to your hand. Additionally, it has the effect where if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard in any way, you can add 2 cards from your deck to your hand, one of them being their field spell card, Spiral Resort, and the other being any Spiral monster, except another copy of itself. And its floating effect is a hard once per turn, but its on-field effect is only a soft once per turn. So the card basically searches out 3 cards, which is a +2 in card advantage since one of those searches does require it to go to the graveyard, but it replaces itself with 2 other cards. Plus, searches once while it's on the field. So, the same card advantage as Block Dragon basically. And Spirals are a deck that have a lot of ways to make use cards that are searched out, and were part of a tier 0 strategy when Spiral Quick Fix was unlimited, and Firewall Dragon and Nightmare Goblin were unbanned, and uneroded. So, with all of those cards being hit on the ban list, there was really no reason to restrict Master Plan, because she was kind of hard to bring out. The best way to use her was with Spiral Double Helix, special summoning the card directly from the deck. That way they could use it for a link summon in order to get the full 3 searches. Then, Konami released a piece of Dark Magician support, which unintentionally works so well with Spiral Master Plan that it was eventually banned as well, in order to rein in just the absolute power of the searches those 2 cards provided together. Magician's Souls is a level 1 monster which has the effect where, if this card is in your hand, you can send a level 6 or higher spellcaster type monster from your deck to the graveyard in order to special summon this card from your hand. And while it's on the field, it has another effect, where you can send 2 Spell or Trap cards from your hand or field to the graveyard in order to draw an equal number of cards. So, you could special summon Magician's Souls from your hand by sending Spiral Master Plan from your deck to the graveyard, since it's a level 7 Spellcaster type monster. And also, some of the cards that Spiral Master Plan search out are not immediately useful the turn you get them, but do have useful graveyard effects, like Spiral Mission Rescue, which can banish itself from the graveyard in order to special summon a Spiral monster from the graveyard, or Spiral Mission Recapture, which can banish itself from the graveyard to prevent destruction of your Spiral monsters, or even Spiral Mission Assault, which allows you to special summon a Spiral monster from your hand with its graveyard effect. And Spirals could get Spiral Master Plan out of the graveyard easily with Spiral Gear Big Red, or of course Spiral Mission Rescue, in order to use Spiral Master Plan in order to do all of its searches, and then turn some of those cards it searched into more card draw with Magician's Souls effect, where it was just a match made in consistency heaven that spiraled Spiral cards into Tier 1 status again, even after Konami had tried so hard to hit all of their combo pieces on the ban list so people would stop using them. So because Spiral Master Plan was already a machine-generated advantage, and they printed a card which accidentally worked to turn its advantage into even better advantage, Spiral Master Plan was banned in April 2020, a few months after Magician's Souls was released. Could Spiral Master Plan be unbanned? Spirals are way too good at searching and recurring their resources to the point where they don't really need their archetype version of Black Dragon back in the game, especially when they have Magician's Souls that just enables their plays even harder. As long as Magician's Souls is in the game and Spirals have their current ban list of cards, Spiral Master Plan is just a little bit too much advantage, or if you're able to pull off the full combo, it puts you at such an advanced game state, it's really hard for your opponent to just come back from the amount of advantage, so it probably can't be unbanned anytime soon. How could they fix Spiral Master Plan to be unbanned? The card kind of exists just to search a whole bunch, so the way to fix it would be to probably just restrict how it can do all of its searches, with a suggested fix to where it just shares a hard once per turn between both of its effects. So if Spiral Master Plan could only use its effect to search on the field or search on floating once per turn, then either way, that would lower the amount you could search from the card each turn by at least one, which would make it a lot more reasonable, and not the same kind of card advantage as a Black Dragon. I'm not sure if that would be enough to fix the problem, but it would definitely lower the power level without changing the card too much. Next up, we have Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow. This is a level 5 tuner monster which can special summon itself from your hand if you control no monsters. Then when this card is special summoned, you can special summon 2 Vague Shadow tokens, which are level 1 and have no stats, that have the lingering effects where they can't be tributed or used as synchro materials. And Vague Shadow has the other effect where it can banish itself and one or more face-up non-tuner monsters you control in order to special summon a Blackwing synchro monster from your graveyard, whose level is the same as the monsters banished for the effect, and that synchro monster is also treated as a tuner. So the intended use of Gofu was a way to special summon your Blackwing synchro monsters from the graveyard, and it was definitely not meant to be used in any other kinds of decks besides Blackwings. And for this intended purpose, they added the usual restrictions to the token so they couldn't be taken advantage of. So this card was definitely made before Link monsters were added to the game, because Link monsters immediately made this effect really powerful. The card doesn't use your normal summon, nor does it lock you out of any other summons for the turn. As long as you have a clear field, it's a straight +2 in board presence card economy, which can immediately be used for a Link 3 monster. And one of the monsters it summons is a tuner, which means you can go into Crystron Halki Fibrax and still have 1 token left over for use in other combos. So because the card is a straight +2 in card advantage for any deck that uses Link monsters, it was a pretty no-brainer auto-inclusion in pretty much every deck under the sun, unless you just did not like to use Link monsters at all for whatever your strategy was using. So in an effort for Konami to curtail a lot of cards that were unintended to work with Link monsters, Gofu was banned in February of 2018 alongside cards like Dandelion and Level Eater. Could Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow be unbanned? Probably not, because Link monsters are even more powerful than it was banned in 2018, after they lifted a lot of the restrictions on Master Rule 4 in 2020. If it was unbanned, it would just be another very easy combo extender that would be included in pretty much every deck that could afford to run it. How could they fix Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow to be unbanned? If they added restrictions to the tokens where you can't Link summon from the extra deck while they're on the field, similar to the restrictions on the tokens from the card Soul Sword of Taya, that would probably do it. It's 100% Link monsters that made this card broken, and it would only be useful in Blackwing decks if they actually made it less generic. And lastly, we have Magispector Unicorn Kirin. This is a level 6 pendulum monster which has the effect where it can't be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and has a quick effect where it can bounce 1 pendulum monster you control and 1 monster your opponent controls to the hand. Now, a few things about this card. This card belongs to the Magispector archetype, which is a pendulum archetype that has the gimmick where their main deck monsters can't be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. And Kirin was meant as the boss monster of that archetype, but funnily enough, can't be pendulum summoned natively by its own archetype, because their scales only go up to 5, and Kirin is a level 6 monster. So the intended way to use this card was basically to just tribute summon it, using your other Magispector monsters on the field after they've used their effects to search out other Magispector cards, as most of the smaller Magispector monsters have effects to search when they're summoned, and then just bounce it back to your hand every turn to keep doing this. The way it was actually used was just in other decks that could special summon it every turn with their pendulum summons by having scales that actually went higher than 6, most commonly in Metal Foes decks. So they would only play Magispector Raccoon Bunbuku in order to search out Kirin, and then just have a free bounce every turn as they could infinitely recur Magispector Unicorn Kirin. So, Unicorn basically became a compulsory evacuation device on legs, that came back every turn and also attacked for 2,000 points of damage, while being very hard to get rid of because it couldn't be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. And if your opponent did finally have a way to actually get rid of the card, it could just dodge the effect by returning itself to the hand and bouncing one of your opponent's cards. So Kirin was a lot like Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, which is a card that's also able to disrupt your opponent's plays while dodging pretty much any form of removal because its effect requires it to destroy itself. And with how much competitive play Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer sees, specifically because of its ability to disrupt and dodge effects at the same time, you can imagine how good Kirin was at his time, being able to do the exact same thing and was even harder to actually destroy. So just kind of think of Magispector Unicorn Kirin as the early version of Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, or maybe an even superior version tailor-made for Pendulum decks that could afford to bring out a level 6 monster every turn. So Magispector Unicorn Kirin was banned in March of 2017, about a year and a half after its release, which is actually a pretty fast time for a card to be banned, and stay banned as it's still in the forbidden list to this day. Could Magispector Unicorn Kirin be unbanned? This one is kind of a tough question because Master Rule 4 did heavily restrict the power level of Pendulum decks, but the way Kirin uses his effect kind of gets around the Master Rule 4 restrictions, because its effect returns itself to the hand, not the extra deck, and Pendulum summoning monsters from the hand has no restrictions like the extra deck does. So because Pendulums as a whole are kind of underpowered due to Master Rule 4 restrictions, they might be able to unrestrict Kirin in order to give all Pendulum decks their own Phoenix Enforcer. But also, Kirin is still just as useful today as it was back in 2017. But also, the meta today is way stronger than it was in 2017. So I'm kind of up in the air of whether this card could come back or not. It's obviously a very strong Pendulum support card, which can be used in pretty much any Pendulum deck to great effect, just as long as they have the skill that lets them summon their level 6 monster from the hand, and they have a strategy that allows them to play the card in the first place. So I would say tentatively, it probably could be unbanned, and it probably wouldn't cause any more problems than what happened when they unbanned other powerful cards, like the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche. How could they fix Magispector Unicorn Kirin so it could be unbanned? If they restricted its effect to the Magispector archetype more, that would make it so it's not a generic boss monster for Pendulum decks. So if it had the effect where it simply cannot be Pendulum summoned except by having Magispector cards in your Pendulum zones, or some other similar restriction, they could probably unban the card because it literally wouldn't be summonable without some kind of support that changes the scales of your Pendulum monsters. It'd be a lot more balanced of not coming back every turn for free, as you'd have to actually perform the tribute summon as it was probably intended. Alright, and that's the video. I have one more video on banned monsters, and then I should have covered pretty much all of the banned cards in the game.